This happened to me during my first year of university. It was October. I was living in the dorms, and I need to give you a brief rundown of the dorms. You need a key card to gain access to your specific floor, so even though someone on the 3rd floor and 4th floor live in the same building, they can't access each other's floors. I had injured myself playing sports, so I was under orders to rest, which meant no Halloween parties for me. It was pretty sad for a horror fiend like myself, but to try and make the time a happy one, I busied myself helping to make costumes for people and doing their makeup. Once I was finally finished, I packed up my makeup and decided to watch some movies in my room. A guy popped up and introduced himself. We chatted a bit and exchanged email addresses, and I walked back to my room and said goodnight. The first warning sign was that he walked into my room behind me, despite me saying I was going to walk into my room. I felt really awkward and tried to say, in a roundabout way, that he needed to leave, but he wasn't getting the hint. I finally had to say directly that he needed to leave my room now. I chalked this up to him, maybe being drunk or something, but I did wonder how he got onto my floor if he wasn't with anyone partying. Before I went to bed that night, I checked my email, and there were 5 from Mr. Creep. The first being, "Hey, I'm so glad we're friends," and the rest asking why I wasn't online. A few days later, I got a knock on my door when I was studying, and it was him. I explained that I was studying and needed privacy. He tried to walk into my room again, but I braced my arm on the frame and said firmly that I needed to study. The next day, he was at my door again, and then again at the next. I began pretending that I was not home. Another day there was a knock at the door, and when I checked the peephole, there was no one there, and I assumed the postman had come. I opened the door, and lo and behold, it was the creepy guy. He has begun hiding from the peephole, so I would be more likely to answer the door. I told my roommate never to open the door if he was there, and I told the people living on my floor that this guy was beginning to creep me out. So if he wanted to get on the floor, whatever sob story he gave them, don't let him on. A few days after that, I was on the bus coming home, and I got a text from someone who lived on my floor. They told me not to come home because Mr. Creep was on my floor and was sitting in front of my door, just waiting. I went to a friend's house and spent the night, and when I got home, I was told he waited for 4 hours before leaving. At this point, I was getting freaked out. A few days after that, he began waiting outside the building, and if I left, he would follow me wherever I went. I was too spineless to tell him to go away, and I tried to be more passive about it. I never spoke and never gave any indication I was paying attention, but he followed me to class and the cafeteria and always tried to follow me home and get access to the floor. I went to the resident advisor, who's an older student who sort of watches over the floor, and told her what happened. She spoke to the RA for his floor and was told that Creep had been telling his own RA that we were best friends and dating. My RA tried to explain that I was uncomfortable, but the other RA believed him, and that was that. Thankfully, one thing did deter him. He would never approach me if I was with a group of people, so my floor mates banded together. If I went to dinner, I went with my floor, and if I wanted a drink or seconds, someone had to come with me. Walking to class and even waiting for the bus was done in a group. He got onto my floor once when someone else was coming home, and he forced his foot in the door to let himself in. I was hidden in another room. When he left my door to go and sit in the television lounge to wait for me, I went downstairs and ran around to the other side of the building and got into my room before he noticed. Then the phone calls began. I never gave him my number, but he somehow obtained my mobile and room phone. At first, it would be 1 to 2 phone calls a day until I told him I wanted him to leave me alone. Then, the calls began coming in every hour, with him begging and pleading for me to talk to him. Without caller ID, I needed to answer the phone because of school and my part-time job. At this point, it was November, and I was a wreck. I was tired of having to plan out doing simple things like going for food or walking to a bus stop. Stress wasn't helping me recover from my injury, and I was losing weight, and I just looked sickly. I went back to the RA and begged her to help me. She went to the head of the dorms and explained everything that happened. I explained how far this had gone, and my roommate told them that he had followed her a few times, demanding that she tell him where I was, I felt awful. She never told me this because she was afraid of upsetting me further, and I felt really terrible for putting her through this garbage. I don't know what went on behind closed doors. From what I guess, he was told to leave me alone, and any further contact would result in him being kicked out of the dorms. There was one email where he went insane on me, telling me how awful I was and demanding how I could do this to him. He's delusional. He said we were so happy together and that I was definitely cheating on him with other men. After that, there was nothing. At first, when I'd see him around campus, I would run to the women's toilets to hide. I'd see him around town or on campus, and he'd always just stare at me. He never tried to approach me, never tried to get my attention. He was just staring. I used to walk by and try to pretend I didn't notice him staring, and I'd try and act like my heart wasn't pounding. I'm a 20-year-old, short, petite female working at Subway, and I can't help but be nice to anyone, even if they creep me out. I feel bad, usually. About a year ago, we had this guy around 35 to 40 years old who would come in every day for lunch. He was fascinated by my stretched ears and the few piercings I had on my face, and always asked questions. He would sit down after I rang him out and watch me from his table for 2 hours non-stop, just staring at me while I helped other customers. This goes on for about 2 weeks. Every day he would ask for my number, saying he had plugs and tunnels he wanted to give me, and see me wearing them in my ears, and I always politely declined. One day I was alone in the store because my manager had to run to the bank. We were really slow that day, so I was just in the back room messing around on my phone. I heard the door chime, looked up, and yet no one was there. Then I saw the man walk past the front of the store really quickly, like he was in a hurry. The store phone rings. I said, "Thanks for calling Subway. How can I help you?" Then the person answered, asking if I was the girl with the nice ears. I found that weird. I responded with a yes and asked who was calling. Then he asked weird questions. "Are you alone in the back room right now? Are you working by yourself?" At this point, I really got creeped out and knew it was him. I hung up and texted my manager about the situation so she would hurry back. He called again, this time asking me more weird questions. For example, he asked what I would do with him in a room with the door locked. Did I have a boyfriend? Why was I playing hard to get? I was very nervous, but nothing happened, fortunately. My manager gets back and I tell her everything. In the middle of the lunch rush, he calls again. This time, my manager answered, and to this day, she never told me what he said. However, the look on her face made my spine shiver. She told him if he called again or showed up here, she would call the police. I thought that was the end of it, but alas, I was wrong. About a week later, I'm clocking out and getting ready to walk to my car parked in the front. When I looked outside, I saw him standing by my car and looking inside it. I was an idiot and left the back door unlocked. I watched him crawl inside and shut the door. The creep was trying to hide in my back seat and do God knows what to me when I got in. My manager locked the front door of our store and called the police. When they arrived, they had to pretty much drag him out of my car, and he was arrested. On him were a butcher knife, rope, and a rag with chloroform on it. If I hadn't looked up when I did, I would probably be dead right now. A couple of years back, when I was in college, I was the victim of a long-term stalker. I am a male, 20 at the time. It started out fairly innocuous. On Valentine's Day, I started to receive secret admirer-type text messages from an unknown number. I assumed it was a friend of mine playing a joke, as I was in a room with a handful of tech-savvy people at the time. I tried to gauge their reactions and asked if anyone was messing with me. They all denied it, and I believed them, as they were pretty bad liars. It was further confirmed that it was none of them. When I got a phone call from the number, a voice on the other end said, "Is this John Morgan?" I replied, "Yes. Who is this?" I was hoping I could identify the voice. At that point, they hung up and resumed texting. Things started to get weirder when the person began asking pretty personal questions. They were repeatedly asking, "Are you doing something tonight?" I sometimes replied yes and that I was busy working, but they kept insisting we should meet up. On top of all this, I was getting various images sent to me from a separate email from a service called Text Now. This confirmed it wasn't a real number, and I now had a username to connect to the person. I don't know if it was their intention, but I actually enjoy trying to figure out mysteries like this. I took it upon myself to expose this person without giving away anything about myself, so I kept it up. I texted them back for a while and dug more and more information about the person. I tried compiling these into a profile and eliminating possibilities. Unfortunately, this just encouraged them as they insisted I send pictures over and over. I know, it was my bad. Then, they sent a weird one. It was a photo of a white lacy dress hanging in their closet with an accompanying text. "This is my wedding dress for when I marry you." It has various heart and love emojis. They continued to pry about where I was going to be that evening, and I still refused to give details. Then they dropped where they were going to be, a party on campus that night. I couldn't go regardless as I was working. Then I got another bombshell. They asked if I lived in apartment 68, which I did. I recognized the style of apartment they were in based on a picture they sent earlier, so I decided I'd throw a curveball. "You live in Mahogany Complex, right?" They asked, how did I know that? I told them I recognized their door. All those apartments had the same color of door frame, which was visible in the edge of a picture they sent. The conversation kind of fizzled out here. I didn't go to that party and didn't get any more texts. Fast forward to October in the following school year. I was a senior and busy as hell. One evening, I got a text from an unknown number. "Is this John Morgan?" So I played dumb. I pretended like I wasn't freaking out, that after many months, this person was contacting me again, and I still hadn't figured out who it was. These questions were instantly more personal and really weirded me out. Don't ruin the fun. Not knowing who I am is part of the mystery. "I won't tell you who I am. Not now. Too much to lose." They'd say stuff like that. I'm pretty tired of this game, and I was trying to work, but still, I do want to see if I can pick out any more details, so I'm doing the bare minimum to keep this going. This is December, the end of the semester. They proceeded to call me multiple times. I denied every call, but they kept coming. I think there were 14 calls that night. I turned my phone off. The following week I was in the class I was a TA for. Students were presenting their final work on the projector, and I had queued multiple tabs on the projection computer. 2 different students had work on Google Drive. When the second student logged into their account, they didn't open a private window, so it logged out the first student. I saw this happen, but the first student wasn't in the room, so when she came back I asked her to log in again. We were both standing in the projection booth. She was at one end of the computer, and I was messing with the sound system on the other side, but I happened to turn and look at the projector screen when she was logging into Google. This hit me like a ton of bricks. The username she logged in with was the same username as the Text Now account that had been sending me photos. I quickly turned away and pretended to be busy with something until she finished opening her work. I thanked her, and she left the booth without realizing her mistake. I tried to play it cool, but inside I was going crazy for the rest of the class. After almost a year, I knew who it was. She finally slipped up, and honestly, I was much more scared now than I had ever been. This person had a history of being pretty creepy around my friends. Although she had never personally interacted with me outside of class, all my friends had strange experiences. I made a meeting with a counselor who seemed to really care and offered to look into it. A couple of weeks later, they emailed me saying that this student is going abroad next semester, so we're not going to do anything. I insisted that at least something temporary should be put into place. They didn't do anything, but what did I expect? This school is pretty notorious for not giving a damn about these kinds of things. I didn't run into her again, and she hasn't texted me. So for the time being, that is where the story ends. I broke up with my abusive ex. I moved into my parents' home with my daughter. We had a lot of snow one night, and when we woke up in the morning, I noticed footprints leading up to my window. Then we noticed that there were footprints leading up to all of the windows. We found Marlboro menthol cigarette butts in the snow and traced the footprints to the township hall that we live across from. My ex stood outside and looked in through all the windows, and we didn't know until the next day. My bed was right next to the window. We invested in new locks and curtains for all the windows. We called the police since I had an order of protection, but since we didn't see him, they couldn't do anything. I worked in an ER as a nurse, and twice he came in as a patient. There was never anything actually wrong with him, so we all suspected that he did it as a way to scare me. I never had to be his nurse. Once again, there was no way to prove that it was intentional. Somebody wrote slurs in the dirt on my car multiple times. One time I noticed it in the parking lot of the local grocery store, so I'm unsure of when it was written. But it creeps me out to know he might have been in the store watching me. He just stopped eventually, as far as I know. He got a girl pregnant, and from what I heard, he left the state to avoid being a father. Our daughter and I are safe now. We have a security system, a dog that barks like a madman anytime somebody strange is in the yard, and my SO has assured me that he will do anything to protect us. I still recently received some messages from his mom and sister. They told me that I'm a terrible mom and that it's all my fault that they can't see my daughter when in reality they have never tried. They also told me that I'm a liar and that my ex never abused me or stalked me. I know the truth though. Please drop a like and subscribe to Eerie Echoes for more horror stories. As always, thank you for watching.